Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce one of the truly great leaders in our industry. He was on your video a little bit earlier, Tony Earley, the Executive Chairman of DTE Energy. Tony is also a former chair of Edison Electric Institute and the Nuclear Energy Institute, and he is currently chair of the Edison Foundation. He understands innovation. He's a board member of Ford and a number of other companies that are doing some very innovative, creative things, and has been one of our leaders of our industry in establishing a vision for the electric utility industry. Please give a warm, warm welcome to Tony Earley.
Thanks, Tom. I do need to give Tom my card because I want my residual check to go to the right address for that video we did. Let me add my welcome to Powering the People. It's terrific that we have such a great turnout here today. Being from Detroit, I know a little bit about the automotive industry. I also know something about the utility industry. I've been in the utility industry for 25 years. I've been on the board of Ford Motor Company for 2 years. And I can honestly tell you that for both industries, this is one of the most exciting times that anyone can remember. One of the interesting things about these two industries that you may not know is that just over 100 years ago, Henry Ford actually worked for my company, Detroit Edison. He was an engineer working in the power plants. And one of my predecessors, the then CEO of the company, called him in one day and wanted to promote him, but said, "Henry, you got to quit playing around with those newfangled machines in the machine shop, or you got to quit." So he quit and started Ford Motor Company, and the rest is history. And he started a revolution in travel. Before then, not many people had cars, and of course, he innovated in a way that made travel universal. And today, I think we're welcoming that same seismic change in transportation. We're seeing a complete change in the world of electric cars and trucks. And we believe, as I said in that video, electric power will someday really transform the transportation sector. And so in case you haven't seen them, I want to give you a virtual tour of the new Nissan Leaf, Chevy Volt, and the Ford Transit Connect that are sitting out front. So we're going to try a video feed in here. Jessica is out there. Jessica, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Tony. Thank you very much. Many of you got to take a peek of these cars beforehand, but with me I've got Monica Murphy, who's here to describe the Chevy Volt.
Hi, thank you for having us. This is our new Chevy Volt, the first all-electric vehicle with range extension by General Motors. You can see that we have it set up for charging on a normal household 120-volt outlet. This would cost maybe between $1.50 and $2 a day. This is an electric vehicle that's fun to drive, very peppy, very smooth acceleration, and there's a number of neat features inside I'd like to show you.
Great, that sounds wonderful. So you're just turning the car on here.
I'm turning the car on with the push of a button. You can see we have 36 miles of range remaining on the battery. And we'll take a quick look at where our fuel economy is. Over 250 miles per gallon today is what we're showing, and 161 miles per gallon over the life of the vehicle. There are a number of features that you can look at as far as charging, so you can charge in the most economical way, such as mid-peak or off-peak hours by your utility company. And as you can see, the driver has a lot of feedback here on the dash as to how efficient they're driving. They can look at this efficiency meter and gauge whether they're staying within kind of the meter there to get the best fuel economy possible.
You call this an extended range vehicle. What does that mean exactly?
Right. The reason we call it that is because after the battery depletes, if you're not able to charge it into some kind of a household outlet or auxiliary charger, in a public area, you have a small generator on board that will come on and basically run off of gasoline to make electricity to fund the electric motor. That will allow you to drive electrically for about another 300 miles or until you can plug it in.
Jessica,
so you don't experience any range anxiety.
Jessica, would you ask her how long it takes to charge the vehicle?
Sure. How long does it take to charge the vehicle?
Right, it can take overnight 8 to 10 hours on a standard household outlet like we're showing here. Or we can upgrade the charging to what we call level 2 charging, a 240-volt outlet, which we can charge in approximately 4 hours.
Great, well thank you very, very much, Monica. We're going to walk over here to the to Janine and the Nissan Leaf. And I understand the Leaf stands for Leading Environmentally Friendly Affordable Family Car.
Yeah, it is our 0%, zero emission, 100% electric, 5-passenger family sedan that we now have as the electric car. It went on sale in December, and we're getting ready to go mass market by the end of the year.
Okay, let's take a look here at the charging station. What's unique about this here?
Sure. Well, as it is a 100% electric vehicle, we have a few options for charging, where you could do home charging here at 120 or 240 volts, and here would be the DC fast charge, which would be 440, which would be more for commercial use.
Great. And I understand the interior is made out of recycled water bottles. Is that correct?
Yeah, a large percentage of the interior, the cloth seats, are made out of recycled water bottles. And we also have a program to recycle the battery after its use with the vehicle.
And unfortunately, you can't see the back of the car, but what's exciting is there's no tailpipes. It's 100% electric.
Yeah, no gasoline goes into the car, so no emissions comes out. So it is 100% electric, no tailpipe.
Thank you so much. And now we're moving on. Literally just arrived here. This is Mike from Azure Dynamics. They're partnering with Ford, who's created this Transit Connect electric vehicle.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about this.
Well, we built the Transit Connect off of the traditional Transit Connect electric vehicle, which was brought to North America a little bit over a year ago. We're providing the electric powertrain to the North American market and the European market.
And from what I understand, you've actually had to borrow this because these are in use, and you're very excited about that.
Yes, this vehicle actually belongs to an outfit here in Washington, D.C., and because of the demand that we've had with the vehicles, we've gone back to customers who are thrilled with the vehicle and asked them if we can use them for exhibits and showings just like this. So, a very quick note on the agency that has the vehicle, their drivers are now fighting over the one vehicle. So it's a really good story for us. I mean, it's very successful.
That's great. And even here in cold Washington, you're getting up to 60 miles per charge with the radio playing and the heat on, and up to 80 miles per mile per charge normally. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the range. It varies. I mean, it's going to be from 50 to 80 miles, depending upon the auxiliaries, the usage, the drive cycle, and So in DC, they've been averaging about. I think they're just around the 60 mark on a full charge. So they're very happy with it.
That's great, and it's great that they're fighting over it. Well, that's the 3 vehicles that we have down here, so back to you, Tony.
Jessica, thanks for that tour. That's
Thanks.
terrific. There's something really special about electric drive vehicles. It's the near silent ride, the immediately available torque that makes it a great car by anyone's standards. If you've never driven one, the way it accelerates is really awesome. There's no transmission, so the accelerator pedal feeds electricity directly to the motor. And when you step on that pedal, the car literally jumps ahead. And with the battery centered down the middle of the car, it gets great handling. No one is going to mistake these cars for golf carts. The fact that they get great mileage and are emissions-free is just a bonus. Now, I obviously have a bias here, being from Detroit, but you don't need to take my word for it. In January, 50 automotive journalists in the U.S. and Canada named the Chevy Volt the North American Car of the Year at the 2011 Detroit Auto Show. Motor Trend and Automobile magazines have also given the Volt their 2011 Car of the Year awards. A January cover story in Bloomberg and Business Week focused on the Leaf and the Volt and their potential impact as the first serious contenders for mass-scale electric cars. And I can tell you that electric utilities are committed to making the electric transportation system a success. Electrifying transportation will create new, high-quality jobs and help reduce our country's dependence on oil imports, and it will be good for the environment. So we have a great panel today to talk about electric vehicles, and I'll ask them to come on up and we'll get set up for the panel. We'll just run down. I'll do quick introductions, but their bios are in the materials you got, and I don't want to spend time on the bios because they've got superb credentials. But to my right is Jim Piro, who's President and CEO of Portland General Electric. Next to him is Britta Gross, Director of Global Energy Systems and Infrastructure Commercialization at General Motors. Next to her, we have Ted Craver, Chairman, President, and CEO of Edison International. Next to him is Nancy Gioia, the Director of Global Electrification at Ford Motor Company. And on the far end, Don Karner, President and CEO of ECOtality North America. So let me start off, and I know the electric utilities and the auto companies have tried electric vehicles for years. In fact, in the city of Detroit in 1912, there were a fleet of electric taxi cabs around. But if you go to our garage, you can find Ford EcoStars, you can find EV1s. We, I think, even had an AMC Pacer electric vehicle. Oh my God. I'll ask each one of you, what's different about today? Why do you think that the vehicles that we're talking about, the vehicles that are outside, are going to make a real difference when in the past we've gone through these cycles that turned out to be just fads?
I'll start with just one, battery life. We're now seeing battery lives, the 10 years, these lithium-ion batteries with much more capability, which will give us the range that we need, and the price is coming down. And I think that's the good news. With economies of scale, we'll see the price of those come down, make it much more affordable, and that's a key difference maker.
And I would just add to that, certainly the lithium-ion battery capability is just stunningly accelerated and improved in the last few years and going to get better and better. I would add to that it's a different time. And every learning from the previous generation of the EV1, for example, that we did, every learning from that, how it charges, how simple it charges, more functional vehicle, the whole range extender aspect of what we did with the Chevy Volt, all those things were done because of the learnings we had from the EV1. So nothing was lost. It was a point in time. Time is different now. There is so much awareness. Carl said it to Senator Levin just said it here a minute ago. Energy security, environment, sustainable ability here in the United States to solve our economic issues here at home and so on. And I think just sort of the jobs aspect, it's different than it was 10 years ago. And I think the whole moment is right now leveraging the technology and then the environment.
Ted?
Actually, we're celebrating our 125th anniversary of our company this year. And right behind my desk, probably like you, Tony, I have a picture of a 1915 electric wagon, as it was called then, and it was for our utility crew. Actually, 1/3 of our fleet at that time were electric vehicles. So I think we're just going back to the future.
Back to the future.
But I think actually the reason why it's different now is because of the cost factor. The affordability, I think, is going to be increasingly important. And with the simpler drivetrain and with the lower cost for electricity, the operating cost, you have to get over the initial capital cost, but the operating cost of the electric drive vehicles are about 1/3 to 1/4 what they are for internal combustion engines. And I think that's going to be a huge element as gasoline prices continue to move up. So I think it's the economic proposition that's the big changer.
Okay, Nancy?
Well, you know, kind of building on the theme here, one of the reasons electric car practically disappeared by 1930 was it didn't meet the customer requirement. So as we've talked about some of the important factors, the technology has improved to the level where it does work. But back in 1915, the electric starter came out, so the gasoline propelled vehicle suddenly became something that was convenient to use, as well as it could work the roads as the roads connected from Detroit to Chicago or New York to Washington, et cetera. It could go the distance. And it was half the cost of the electric vehicle. So as we look at that, what that meant is that there was a lower cost, much better match to the customer, and that's where the customers went in the free market. So what's changed? I think today we now have technology that is enabling us to provide well-matched, customer-driven solutions. And if we walk away from a customer drive that meets the needs of the customer, I think that's where you start to see the market not be sustainable. In addition to the battery technology, I think two other big elements have really enabled electrification where we didn't have it before. The computing power that we now have on board vehicles, and I heard it mentioned a couple times, the technology is more than the battery. the systems that we operate between the safety systems, the vehicle propulsion systems, and the electrification integration, whether they're hybrids, plug-in hybrids, or full battery electrics, we now have computing power that allows us to have a seamless drive and an enjoyable, fun driving experience with this technology. That also gives us the systems engineering is the other aspect. It is a very complex integrated system. So now we have the ability to model that with development tools and to prove that out. So durability, reliability, and safety are delivered. And when you have all of that, a customer-driven solution that's durable, reliable, safe, and fun and engaging, that finally, with the other bit of technology and battery, is affordable, becomes more affordable, now we have something that I think really allows the industry to grow. And we're at the beginning of that.
Don?
Thanks. I think it's information technology. There's obviously not one thing that makes it different, but clearly the availability of information technology that can integrate the vehicle into the outside world makes a huge difference, I think, in this run at electric vehicles with us. We heard Chairman Wellinghoff talk about a couple of additional, actually, value chains that can ascribe to these vehicles because they can be connected to the outside world. There are a number of different value chains that information technologies brings to these vehicles, these grid-connected vehicles, that will help drive that cost down. It will also give us the opportunity to exceed customer expectations, to innovate and create some different lifestyle experiences with transportation that we haven't even imagined yet. And so I think that capability will play out over the next several years as people begin to use these vehicles and they begin to understand their capabilities.
So now you've convinced us that these cars are marketable, and let me turn to Britta because she's got a car out in the market. Tell me how the customer experience is different when you buy an electric vehicle.
The experience of the drive of the vehicle?
And well, how you buy it, do they have to get the chargers set up, all of those details.
Okay, very good. So it's a little bit different. You're absolutely right. It's something that we definitely pay a lot of attention to. The Volt comes with a cord set. It's a 120 volt cord set that plugs into any three-pronged home outlet. And that's back to the EV1. We learned, again, you don't do a special infrastructure system. You don't want to depend on an infrastructure system being built up. We wanted to make this vehicle as easy as plugging into your home outlet. So outside in your driveway outside the house where you plug in your Christmas lights, or inside your driveway, or out in the carport, in front of the hotel, wherever you are, if you can find a three-pronged outlet, you can probably charge this vehicle. And it charges in about 10 hours. So that charge cord comes with the purchase of the vehicle. Okay, it comes with it. You can also charge the vehicle at 240. That's more like a clothes dryer experience. And that'll shorten and speed up the time to charge the vehicle. It happens in about 4 hours if you have a 240 volt charger. And we've got a company, SPX is a service installer that we've got to organize all the options that a customer would have for these 240 volt chargers because the field is very big. We've got DOE grant programs that are fantastic that have ECOtality as part of it that we're partners on, and Coulomb chargers. We have our own Voltec charger. SPX provides their own hardware, so we're very agnostic about the kind of 240 volt charger. We just want the experience to be pretty smooth, nationally pretty common, as affordable, as competitive, as automotive-like at the scales we operate as possible. So we can increase volume to millions of people getting these vehicles, and the process of getting those chargers, if you just do it with the 120 that comes with the vehicle and plug it in the outlet, or whether you want to step it up with a slightly faster charger, it goes smooth, and we can scale this thing up to millions of vehicles as soon as possible.
Great, thanks. Nancy, let me turn to you next, and I know Alan Mullally would kick me if I didn't give you a chance to talk about, what are Ford's plans now to bring vehicles to market?
Yeah, well, of course, we've got, the Transit Connect Electric already out on the road, launched last year, and at the end of this year, Focus Electric launches. And much, I think, what we've really focused on is not just the vehicle, but the electrified vehicle experience. And so when you come into a dealership, we've got an arrangement we've announced with Best Buy, Leviton chargers, where as you come into the dealer and you say, I'd like to buy the car, right there they'll say, well, would you like us to set up a charger appointment? Best Buy and the Geek Squad will come out, they'll assess your house with certified electricians. and determine if your home needs any additional wiring. If you were getting the Focus Electric, we recommend the 240-volt charger, but just like the Volt, it comes with the 110 cord in the car. And now you can easily recharge your vehicle overnight. In addition to that, though, and I think one of the themes you're going to hear is we're breaking the paradigms of how we've done things in the past. In addition, we have Microsoft value charging. So this is actually now an ability you can have your car charged at the lowest possible electric rate. And value charging looks and monitors maybe Southern Cal Edison's rate charges, and yeah, it's lower between 1 and 3, but it's really low between 130 and 230. And the car will absolutely charge and adjust within very short time elements to give you the lowest electricity rate. You may also choose in the future, say, I only want to charge on solar, I only want to charge on wind, only want to charge with certain types of input, all right? So those energy management choices are being put in the hands of the customer. Literally, we also have a new element called My Ford Mobile. It takes the sync technology and the technologies we have in the car, but it puts it mobile on your cell phone or your smart apps or smartphone with the application. And you can charge, you can set your car to charge. You can say, I'm going to stop at an extra place. Can I get there? And on your phone, an app will tell you, well, with the range you have on your vehicle, if you want to stop at Mama and Papa's Pizza on the way home, you're getting a little short on range. So why don't you charge your vehicle now so you have enough range to do so? Or here's 2 or 3 charge points at these places like a Starbucks or a Walmart's. Go stop there while you have to pick something up, and then you'll have enough. So it's really taking the anxiety out of range anxiety, putting that in the hand of consumers in a way that they're really, really becoming used to. So I think what we see going forward is a very integrated experience, and it's just the beginning. I think Don said it. We're just beginning to imagine several of the things of the future. But the real key is, though, when you hop in the car and you go and you press the start button in this case, the drive experience is fun and it's engaging, but you don't have to change how you drive. We aren't changing that experience, and I think that's important to make it acceptable and familiar.
So the economics, I think, are a key driver. Maybe Ted and Jim, you can comment on what's your thinking about how you're going to charge for electric vehicles.
Well, I think picking up on the same theme that Nancy was just saying, I think we're probably just beginning to sort through those types of plans. But right now at our utility subsidiary, Southern California Edison, we have 3 rate plans, which basically are time of use related rate plans. A key point is that we want to get the charging to largely take place at home and thereby largely take place off-peak. That's where you get the real efficiency from the grid. There's a lot of excess capacity in the electric system in the off-peak hours, so roughly speaking from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. And that's prime time for the electric vehicles to be charging. So we're trying to incent exactly that behavior. The work we've done thus far, all of this is very early, but the work we've done thus far suggests that about 80% of the charging will probably take place at the home, which is great from the standpoint of integrating with the grid. One final point I'll just make on that is in California, for instance, we have quite a bit of renewable power in our system, and that's growing. It'll probably be up to 33% of the total power delivered will be from renewables. Much of that is wind power, and it's operating off-peak. So it's a perfect marriage between the renewable generating source and the charging of the electric vehicles off-peak, and we want to incent that through the pricing that we use.
Yeah, very similar with Portland General. Our off-peak rate's about 30% lower than our average rate, so there is an opportunity for customers to charge off-peak at a lower rate. And we, like SCE, or Edison, have a significant amount of renewables. We're about 25% renewables today, and so ability to communicate through our smart meter system to the vehicles to charge them at the optimum time will allow us to maybe give them even a lower discount on price. And I think that's the real excitement about this technology, is we need more off-peak load as we add these variable resources. And the opportunity to have the access to a battery to charge at night will be a tremendous opportunity, as well as what Chairman Willingham talked about, is be able to access these batteries as the technology improves to use that for other types of services on our system.
So when we talk about electric vehicles, I mean, the battery is the key. Don, I know you've done work in this. Talk a little bit about what kind of progress we can expect in battery technology coming up.
Well, there's certainly a lot of work going on. A lot of the work is in driving costs down, which is going to be significantly important to us. Senator Levin talked about the investment through stimulus that's been made in production facilities, and that's certainly an important step in getting the production capability up, getting that manufacturing in place, and bringing the cost down so that we're really getting better performance for the dollar. To me, that's the most significant piece of what we need to do. We're in the infrastructure business, so I'd rather see investment made in charging than bigger batteries. They last much longer. The cost per kilowatt or kilowatt hour is much less. And so I think a combination of infrastructure so that people can extend the range of their vehicles and lower cost of batteries is ultimately what's going to drive electric transportation.
I was flying down here from Detroit on Monday night, and I noticed Delta Airlines has now set up charging stations at all of the gates where you can plug in your BlackBerry and your iPad and things like that. Don, when do you think we're going to be driving around and see charging stations sprouting up by the mall and other places?
Very soon. We, as you're probably aware, have a project, a public-private partnership with the Department of Energy. We're calling the EV project, that will deploy about 13,000 chargers in 17 different cities across the U.S. And we're partnered with General Motors and with Nissan to put residential chargers in for about 8,300 vehicle purchasers, and then build out a mature charge infrastructure in those areas in commercial space, and then study that to understand, is it 80% of charging that will happen at home? What's the impact of different on-peak versus off-peak rates on that ratio? Where are the best places to put chargers? Where are the really bad places to put chargers? Because I'm sure we'll make some mistakes along the way. So that rollout is really beginning as we speak. Last week we did the first residential installations. We'll be doing the first commercial installation soon, and basically down the West Coast through Arizona, Texas, and over through Tennessee and Washington, D.C., folks will begin to see that commercial infrastructure, both level 2 infrastructure as well as DC fast chargers, begin to appear as the vehicles roll out and we begin to get a concentration of vehicles to utilize it.
Britta, how important to your rollout plans are charging stations? And clearly they aren't around in many places. Is that important to you, or can you roll this out without the charging stations?
We can. The Volt was designed to not need the parallel infrastructure. That's why it has the 40-mile range, which is what 3/4 of Americans travel to and from work less than 40 miles a day. So it became this ultimate, this driving target on the vehicles to get this 40-mile range on the vehicle. After that, it goes 330 or 40 miles on a single tank of gas. So we don't need the infrastructure, but as we get more and more vehicles into the market, the point where it actually does become quite attractive is for all those people. It's not lots of people, but when the market, when we have a lot of supply of vehicles out there, it actually allows us to expand the market to people who don't have a place at home to park their car and charge safely, conveniently, reliably every night. They live in a townhome, they park curbside. If they're lucky, it's in front of their home. Sometimes it's up the street. For those folks, it would be great to have workplace charging in place, because when a car's not parked at home, it is largely always parked at a workplace. So that kind of infrastructure, targeted, where's my car parked for 4 or more hours at a time, that's a great place to put that kind of stuff. It'll open up the market for us, even beyond just homeowners, townhome owners with dedicated parking spots.
So Jim, when you think of all these cars plugging in, what are the concerns that you've got to deal with?
Well, from the electrical grid, what we have to ensure is that the neighborhood has good reliability. That means that the transformers that serve that neighborhood are sized to meet the loads of the neighborhood. So we're going to watch very carefully how these vehicles are deployed into the consumers' homes and watch that, and if necessary, we'll have to upgrade transformers. But I think our system has enough capability to meet that need of the electric vehicles, especially if they're charging off-peak. We have a lot of latent capacity in our system, and so to the extent they do charge off-peak, we see very little cost impact on our system. And to the extent we do see a high penetration in a neighborhood, we see simply just to upgrade transformers in that neighborhood as a simple fix to address the load. So I think we're well prepared for it. We're working closely with the vehicle sales forces so we can understand where those vehicles are being deployed. And we're also training our customer service reps so as they talk to consumers who want to move to off-peak pricing to ensure that if they have electric vehicles, we can start noting where they are on the map. So trying to be really proactive and looking ahead to see where this is going to play out. Definitely we need to provide our customers that reliable product they depend on.
Yeah, and Ted, are you worried about generation infrastructure? We got enough generation to supply millions of vehicles?
Yeah, I'm not worried about the generation side at all. Actually, really not worried about the transmission side either. It's the distribution piece that Jim was referring to that we just need to be mindful of. In the early days, probably the flow of new vehicles that will come into the system is going to be at a pace where it'll be easily digested. One thing that we haven't talked about yet that I think is worthy of noting, the critical component, I believe, is having the automobile manufacturers at the showroom level really in partnership with the utilities. Because what helps make this a good customer experience, particularly in the early part, is for early identification of where these potential customers are going to be. We believe, like with gasoline hybrids, that you're going to have clusters of early adoption with the vehicles. And a typical circuit in our system has about 12 homes on a neighborhood circuit. So we want to make sure that if it happens to be one of those cluster neighborhoods, like perhaps mine, where you might have 3 homes that want to have an electric vehicle, that's enough additional load on that localized circuit that we need to ensure upstream we've got all the capacity. So that early notification between the showroom and the utility, so we can identify where that is and make sure that there's no hitch in being able to accommodate that demand. That's the key part.
Nancy, is your dealer network prepared to be able to share that kind of information with utilities? How do you think about the dealer piece of this?
You know, it's going to be a real transition for our dealers. So what we've selected is 19 cities for Focus Electric to target first in the deployment and working with those dealers, getting that experience. With the relationship we have with Best Buy and the Geek Squad, there's actually an additional interface there. So it's more than the dealer, it's making sure that group is also a part of this communication network and interface. So we're spending a great deal of effort on the education of our dealers, not only on the behind the wall and the service bays and repair and parts and service. It's also just that communication link with the customer. What can they expect? Who should they be contacting? How do we make it a one-stop shop for our customer? And interfaces all clearly known and laid out, because if they have to go multiple areas, what we'll find is when we start to move beyond the early adopter, that's just going to be hard. That's just going to be hard. On top of that, we have a whole group of dealers who may only sell a handful of electrified vehicles in the first year or two. So just the training and the certification of those dealers, engaging them in that process with very clear partners and contact points at utilities at the key areas is going to be important. And so it's a huge area for us to transition. Now, because that's the full battery electric vehicle, and what we recognize is one type of electrified transportation doesn't work for all. So we have our hybrids, like our Fusion and our Escape. We have our Focus Electric and our Transit Connect Electric, full battery electrics. We're also introducing a plug-in hybrid, similar to the Volt, but different in architecture, easily recharges overnight on a 110 outlet, does not require additional infrastructure changes, and it has, you know, a 500+ mile range on the tank on a tank of gas. So that, what we're trying to do is, some people have access to infrastructure or can afford only so much. Others are going to have maybe homes and plugs that they can go to, but don't have the ability to put in the 240. And then others are going to make maybe a choice on how they drive, and the range fits for a full battery electric. So, you know, I think as this rolls out too, the other challenge for our dealers is multiple customers, different demands, different types of electrification, and how to clearly communicate that.
All of you probably remember the TV show Candid Camera. And I remember there's one skit they did where at a car that came into a gas station and told the mechanic there's something wrong. The mechanic opens it up and there's no engine in there. I can see a mechanic opening up this vehicle and having that same reaction. Anyone you want to comment on how you deal with that? Only a limited number of dealers might be trained in this. But what these cars on the road, and they have a minor glitch, what happens? You can't just pull into your local mechanic.
In the case of the Volt, we have dealers in 7 states. I think there's 765 dealers now selling the Volt in about 7 different states. But we also have a network of service certified dealers for the Volt in the other non-7 launch states. And then by the end of the year, it'll be clearly across all 50 states as we deploy the Volt nationally to all the dealerships. So you do have to think ahead of time that you could have vehicles. In fact, the Volt, I was looking the other day at the list of where the Volts have migrated already. And so even though they're only on sale in 7 states, they've already migrated to 35 states. So you see that they're already local, and they're probably in many of your neighborhoods already. And I'm getting a lot of calls. I thought you said it wasn't on sale. You're lying to me. No, somebody drove it because they can. You can drive these things nationally. So, but you do have to think about rollout in advance, and it's just one of the myriad things that you just have to check through and get your plan up front. And we've been working our tails off for 4 years getting this ready so that it didn't, there was no hitch, and roll the stuff out.
This is another area where technology has really helped us. Is nowadays, for a service technician, if a vehicle did come in and say they weren't certified, we have the hotlines, we have the ability to have, streaming video. Show me, camera, show me what's going on. Okay, let me walk you through this. So I think going forward, that technology that we have in place in our dealers today, we're also going to leverage with these vehicles to be as responsive as possible if for some reason a customer had to bring their vehicle back.
Don, you're in the infrastructure business. Is there anything you see that could help here?
Well, I think Nancy hit the nail on the head there, that the capabilities that exist in the dealers and the work that's been going on with the OEMs training their dealers pretty much assures that these vehicles are going to be taken care of. That's not really a worry from our perspective. A lot of planning, a lot of hard work has gone into these rollouts, and they're very well planned. They're very well supported. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
I'll let each of you comment on this from a policy perspective. And we have a lot of policymakers and agency folks here in the audience. From a policy perspective, what's on your wish list? Anyone want to jump in with that?
I'll jump in on that one. And I think there's a great deal of blocking and tackling that has to happen, certainly from our perspective as an infrastructure provider, and how these vehicles are going to interface with the grid, how that value that the Chairman Wellinghoff talked about is going to be realized. Who's going to realize that? How is that going to be split between the vehicle owner, between the utility, perhaps the infrastructure provider? How is rate design from a utility perspective going to encourage the use of electric transportation? How do we really make electric transportation an asset to the grid and not a liability that people worry about? And from a policy standpoint, there's a lot of work that has to be done there. That work is beginning to get underway, and we're really encouraged by what's happening, both at FERC as well as at the California PUC. A lot of discussion, debate, and progress is being made. But certainly, that's an area that a lot of work will be required.
Okay, and Britta, go to you. And
Yeah, I guess, you know, we're in the hot and heavy right now of the rollout, and I would say, looking around, what I would say to policymakers, regulators, and so on is, I think the next few years, not days and weeks and months, the next few years are huge learning. We don't know everything about the technology of these vehicles, so we over-designed the vehicle. It's why it has liquid heating and cooling systems to keep the battery more temperate. It doesn't like hot, it doesn't like cold, keep it in the middle. We've done a lot of bootstrapping on the vehicle because we also want to make sure that we've learned where can we cut next time? Where can you back off some engineering? Where don't you need so many lines of software code? Same thing for the grid interface. The same. It's a big learning space, AMI, non-AMI, through the PLC or Zigbee, or through OnStar into our vehicles, or through other telecommunication systems into our vehicles. What's the right way to do it? Our time of use rates really worth it because they're very complicated also for these buyers of these vehicles. So I think that learning is really important. I would really strongly suggest let's really focus on walking before we run and putting stakes in the ground, because I think a lot of the answers aren't yet known. How much infrastructure? How little infrastructure? What's the real variability in the cost of home charging installations? There's a lot of variability in the cost of the home chargers that are going in. So extending and making sure that we have incentives for folks doing the home installations would be fantastic, because variability will kill you in the viral web space of people talking about, well, it only cost me $200. Well, it cost me $2,000. Someone's ripping me off. No, your home's very different. And so incentives that go towards the vehicle for the consumers, incentives that go for the charging and the variability in the cost of the home charge installation, these things are very, very powerful. The long-term vision that a lot of that the government used to focus on strategic long-term investment for battery manufacturers and motor drive electronics in this country, hugely, hugely important. We don't have the pockets for it. We don't have the staying power to hang in there for 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's something we just can't do. That investment was so far-sighted, it's really going to help us out a lot. And it was just, this collaboration is just huge. So collaborate, keep things simple, and walking before we run right now is really, really important.
Jim, you had something?
Just two things. One is clarity on the incentives, because I think it's out there. We need to know where it's going to go and kind of what the pace of it is so we can build scale. Because this is what's going to really help this industry. If we can build scale, then we can get the prices down, the cost down, and then it will be an affordable, great vehicle. And then finally, I think from a public policy standpoint, government and businesses need to commit to buying the vehicles. Because we're going to be the first early adopters. We can be the demonstration on how these are going to work. And so our commitment to buy vehicles early on and to get them out there in the public's view is going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
Nancy?
You know, from a policy standpoint, the constancy of purpose of an energy policy and the strategic approach, I think nationally, really important. This cannot be how we're addressing the diversification of fuel for transportation and it's tied to the utilities. This is not a administration by administration discussion. It really is. And this is how I see other nations around the world addressing this. It's a long-term constancy of purpose, shift and diversification of fuel for transportation to include electricity. Now, if we take that framework and we say it's a long-term journey that we're on, a marathon, building on what Britta said, clearly the stimulus package was a big step forward. It was necessary to jumpstart. The question is what then are the building blocks beyond manufacturing facilities to put cells together? What we now need to do is get the cathode and the anode knowledge, technology, equipment, capability in this country. We have to have the assembly equipment for the battery cells, which still primarily comes out of Asia. Nearly 100% out of Asia for the assembly equipment. It's the knowledge of the production process with the new materials coming. So when I think of the whole value stream to a sustained and capable, without incentive, business, in the future. It really requires the knowledge on the technology, the innovation, the production process, and the capability in every region in which electrification is going to be. I think we have a long ways to go there to encourage that. So, you know, a consistent national energy policy, plus what I would really say is the whole value stream on the knowledge generation and manufacturing product development capability going long term is what we'll need to be globally competitive.
Okay. Ted?
Tony, just what that maybe add is, I actually like the fact that the states are beginning to engage in this. California is probably a fair ways down the road, but not all of the rules and regulations are really set at this point. But I think what you're going to find is each state is going to probably have a slightly different twist on certain elements of the policy making. And I think in fairly short order, we'll have some sense of what really works and what doesn't work, which will give people a chance to learn from others' experience and make adjustments along the way. So I think that actually will help the innovation process.
Well, all you texters and tweeters, thank you. I see the questions are starting to come up on my monitor. I'll go to a couple of the audience questions. And, one of them is, how will manufacturers solve the limited range problem? So I guess that's Nancy and Britta.
Well, you know, I think, first of all, we won't solve limited range. What we're going to do is offer a variety of solutions for the customer so that they pick the product that meets their needs. And hybrids, range limitations, 700-800 miles on a tank of gas. Plug-in hybrid, as mentioned, you know, what we'll have there is a range of electrified stored energy in the battery from overnight. You use that up, now it runs like our regular hybrid over 500 miles on a tank of gas on one charge. If I recharge every day, boy, I'm extending that longer and longer. Battery electrics, I think there, until the battery technology has a quantum leap, is it better to reinvest in a very long-range battery electric, which may still have the affordability issue? Or are customers selecting that for their drive conditions, and we really help them manage their range and their energy consumption through the smart apps and the types of tools I mentioned before? So I think, you know, a huge part of this is the learning laboratory Britta mentioned. What best fits the customer need? And then how do we educate or give tools to the customer to let them get the greatest value from the product?
And the Volt doesn't have a limited range problem. So we're good. They're crisscrossing the country as we speak. And there are a number of customers, the first customers that we started rolling out, I think the first week of December or so. And some of those customers have still not put gasoline in their tanks. They're still working on that first tank of gas, and they're milking it for all it's worth because, again, the model was most people don't drive more than 40 miles a day, and if all you use is none or a little bit, it takes you a long time to use up a single tank of gas.
So a related question from the audience is, what about the cost of batteries? Do we expect that cost to come down quickly, or is it just going to be incremental?
Well, I was going to say, we've just completed a really extensive study of the batteries, the battery cells, and there's battery cells, and then there's the system, including the sensors, and then there's the big package. You put it all in and package it. The battery cells represent probably the largest opportunity on cost down, and we've taken cells apart. We've got them measured on how many kilograms of lithium and what's in the anodes, what's in the cathodes, where does that material come from, how's shipping and all of the elements, the manufacturing process, the equipment, where's the equipment manufactured, where's the building, what's the depreciation, amortization on the building, what's a complete line. We've really done this value chain all the way down. We added to that, working with the suppliers on every one of those components, where is the technology, what improvements they expect, and then we've futured this out to 2020 and 2020 and 2030. So what we do see is today battery cells, depending on where they're coming from and which particular technology, are ranging anywhere from $500 to about $1,000 per kilowatt hour. What that means in, you know, for a full battery electric vehicle, a Focus electric type vehicle, 23 kilowatt hour battery, you can do the math, but it's somewhere between $11,000 and $15,000 for the battery. In the future, we do see the ability, potentially, to get down to $250 per kilowatt hour out in the 2020 type time frame with the technology and scale available at that time. that's still a $6,000 US dollar cost for a 23 kilowatt hour battery. So still a substantial amount. So, you know, I think from there, it's going to take a quantum effort. So I think the battery cost, and depending on whether you reinvest in range or our plug-ins for North America, where we typically drive maybe a different types of distances, that may be a better solution than what works for Europe or works for Asia. So, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity, but it's going to be a combination of the technology and scale. And we have more to do on technology first before you ramp up the industry in enormous scale.
Yeah, just real quick, when you do a first generation technology, you're looking at many of the parts that were sourced on the Volt. There was one supplier worldwide that was capable of doing what we asked them to do. They couldn't meet the specs. There's no supply base. So this money that poured into a new supply base here in the United States, for example, for batteries, that adds competition, that adds capability. Now you have the ability in Generation 2 to really start attacking cost. You can't do much on Generation 1 when you have only one player you're talking about. So across the board, it's not just the batteries, it's motor drive electronics, it's you know, big fans, it's everything on these electric vehicles is kind of new. So we have a huge opportunity to cut cost, but I wouldn't want to mislead people to think that this is going to get someday quickly cheaper than a gasoline vehicle. There's always this danger that we get too soft and we start thinking, oh, this was pretty easy. These manufacturers rolled out these vehicles, it looks like it's going just great. We are paddling so fast on these vehicles and this technology to cost out and keep the quality in these vehicles. Gasoline is a very, very tough bar to beat. Gasoline's cheap, and the combustion engine is also a very cheap technology. And to ever get down to that point, that's pretty far away. So we've got to hang in there with a strategy, this sort of comprehensive energy strategy that allows us to stay in there till there's a tipping point reached where everybody wants to buy these vehicles because they drive them and they're thrilled and they're willing to pay whatever that cost is. We'll get it down, but...
Someone in the audience is asking, and you're talking about competition, is the oil industry the competition? Are they fostering or hindering the adoption of PEVs?
Somebody else is going to answer.
Who's going to jump in here?
I'm not going to touch that one.
So from our perspective, as an infrastructure provider, we have BP as a partner, and they're very interested in understanding what infrastructure requirements are for these vehicles and trying to integrate that into their existing retail operations. So, you know, as we see it, there's a lot of curiosity out there and a desire to understand.
Ted, I'd like to ask you to comment on
This is going to be an easy one, right?
the environmental. There's a softball. The environmental benefits of electric vehicles. We heard when we were doing the virtual tour, there's no tailpipe, there's no emissions, but that electricity comes from somewhere. Give us a perspective on how much of an environmental benefit, and you know, some of your plants, you're a large user of coal. How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think the starting point would be the traditional pollutants. Leave greenhouse gas just on the side for a second. You know, coming from Los Angeles, we serve a 14 million population in Southern California, and there's a big concern, always has been, around air emissions. And I think that's where the electric vehicles really make a huge difference. You couple that with the fact that in California, virtually all of the electricity comes from either nuclear, which has virtually no emissions, renewables, or natural gas. Those are really the principal forms of electricity in California. In different parts of the nation, obviously that mix is different. But NRDC and EPRI did I think, a good study a couple of years back. They really looked at this issue on a national basis. So if you took the mix of fuels that we have for producing electricity, first thing to recognize is virtually all of the fuel sources that go into the plants that make electricity are domestic. So petroleum is less than 1% of what is used to make electricity in this country. So that's a huge advantage right away in terms of fuel source. Otherwise, it's about 50% coal, 20% natural gas, 20% nuclear, and 10% hydro and other renewables such as wind and solar. So when they looked at that, what they found is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that had a 40-mile range. That's what they were looking at that on the electric side, and then going to gasoline. Having that driven by the domestic electric system was even more environmentally benign than having a gasoline hybrid electric vehicle. And I think that's really the promise that we're looking for. So there's traditional pollutants, there's greenhouse gas reductions that really come from the fact that it's a lot more efficient to transmit electricity, and battery to wheels is a much more efficient process than gas tank to wheels. And I think that's really where the environmental benefit comes in.
And your comment, I think, was telling. Not only do you have the environmental benefits, but a lot of people are talking about energy security value. Senator Levin talked about that, and the fact that virtually all of our fuel, and Jim, I think you would be the same place, all the fuel is domestic.
Yep. Domestic. Yep. I just make a plug. For those who are really interested in this topic, there's a group called the Electrification Coalition. You can go on the website. They have 2 great documents that really get into the economics and the benefits of electric vehicles and fleet vehicles. And it's probably the 2 best publications on the topic. So I'd really commend you to look at that. Gives you a lot of the detail and the data that we're talking about up here.
Okay. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to put the panelists on the spot. We'll start with Don. Tell me what year there will be 1 million electric vehicles on the road.
Well,
and why?
Okay. Well, I'll flip that around. And if you can tell me what's going to happen in the Middle East, you know, it's a very market-driven situation, as Britta and Nancy well know. We have to create the value for the customer. They have to want to buy these. You can produce all the vehicles you want. If somebody doesn't buy them, it doesn't do any good. So, I mean, I think we're making progress. I'm really at a loss to say a million vehicles. You know, the president has his goals. We'd like to see it be 2 or 3 years down the road, but there are a lot of variables. From my perspective, I think we all need to continue to work at it. We need to create value in the vehicle. We need to create convenience. From a regulatory standpoint, we need to encourage the adoption of the vehicles, and the more of that we can do, the faster the adoption will be. So I've completely avoided your question.
So Nancy, what's Ford's thinking about?
Oh, well, you know, I think building on it, this is where I started, it has to be a customer-driven solution. And so at Ford, we stand for affordable transportation for the masses and solutions that meet their needs. So when I look at it that way, what I can tell you is what we're planning. Because and what we're planning is today about 1% of the Ford global fleet is electrified, primarily hybrids. By 2020, we expect 10 to 25%, that's a range, big range, 10 to 25% of our global fleet to be electrified. That's hybrids, plug-in hybrids, or full battery electrics. Now, we still expect the majority of that to be hybrids for a variety of reasons, affordability and infrastructure, matching the customer need really being the primary. So about 70% hybrids of that 10 to 25, 20 to 25% plug-in hybrids because it's a vehicle that meets the needs, and the remainder full battery electrics. Now the beauty is, don't know, right? I wish I were that good. I'm not. So instead of doing a vehicle or one single technology, we've said we don't know what the growth will be. We want to be robust, so we've electrified our highest volume platforms. What that means is a C-sized platform like Focus will come as a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, a battery electric, an efficient petrol or efficient diesel, built down the same assembly line and flexing automatically at 5 assembly plants around the world. What that does for us is we get the scale and component sharing. We can flex based on customer demand very quickly and rapidly, but also do it in a way that provides a sustainable foundation for business. And to us, with a customer focus and a sustained business model, that is how we see the ability to support what absolutely is an ambitious goal, but what we want to make sure is customer-driven, affordable solutions are available for the customer. So I also avoided the question.
Yeah. Okay, Ted, are you going to give me a date?
But
1.1 million in our service territory by 2020.
Okay,
Service
good.
territory, yeah.
Now I get to give you a caveat. That is our high case. We have done the work as best as we feel we can at this early stage. But our kind of medium case is 450,000 vehicles by 2020 in our service territory. We have a 50,000 square mile service territory in California. The high case was 1.1 million.
Okay.
I think, frankly, I don't mind saying I'm unabashed, unashamed electric vehicle booster. I really believe the customer demand is going to be there. It's going to be a matter of the production side. I think that's going to be the key.
Britta?
I think the production side is going to be great. I think it's the demand side that we got to watch it. And I think if we can just stay flexible and on our toes and watch what's happening with the market and watch the consumers are still seeing the incentives they need, because as you move from early adopters that are more able to pay than fast followers and the mainstream and the laggards, as we move down in a few years, you have more reason to pay attention to whether the incentives are actually doing the trick. So I think we have to keep our eye on that. If we can keep our eye on demand, I think President Obama's goal of 1 million vehicles in 2015, I think it's a great stretch goal. I think we're going to miss it by maybe a year or two. I think there's all reason to think that this industry could put these kinds of numbers out there in the 2017, 2018 period. I think we could do it. But we have to watch demand on these vehicles.
Jim, your time frame?
First of all, oil prices are going up. You look at the supply demand, prices are going up. The economics are just going to look even better for electric vehicles. So my view is 2017.
Great. Well, this has been a great panel. Let's give them a big hand for coming here and sharing their intelligence with you.